You are now in the Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. Thank you to them. It is April Fool's, but we are recording and there will be no shenanigans. Of course, it is Brooke Lopez and Robin Lopez's, therefore, birthday. We were just talking about how perfect that is that the all-time Nets leading scorer and the very silly man that is Brooke Lopez was born on April Fool's Day. Sarah, how are you doing on this wonderful holiday?
I'm fantastic. Just got back from Dallas, and it's been fun to riding calling a Brooklyn Nets 2-game win streak. So I'm here for it.
Yep, and that brings us to the recap of the last week. They lost to the Raptors and the Clippers at home, but then went on the road and found some success. They are on a 2-game win streak as we record this on Tuesday afternoon. They had a weekend win in the nation's capital over the Washington Wizards. Drew Timme game winner in the final seconds, and I know we're going to talk a lot about him. And a win over the Dallas Mavericks on Monday night, which was great. Sarah was in the building. A lot of resiliency, a double-digit fourth quarter comeback. So the Nets are entering the month of April, taking care of business. No April Fools here. Sarah, what have you seen over this last week, generally speaking?
I think it's just such a contrast of what we saw in that Toronto and Clippers game.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas, we may have talked about this, but you can count on one hand the times that it felt like the Nets just really didn't have it, and didn't have it in a sense of urgency
Yeah.
or just a sharpness in how they were playing. Um, and so I think in responding in what things look like. And Washington had won the first two meetings against Brooklyn this season.
Right.
They're an interesting team. I know they were missing pieces, and I understand the way the record looks. But sometimes playing at Washington, given the environment, given a little bit of stagnancy there, can be a challenging place to really get up and play. And then, of course, Dallas, a team that is fighting to get into, they're already in a play-in spot, but just kind of fighting for their playoff positioning. Anthony Davis was back. They just got back Daniel Gafford. Pretty much, a lot of the healthy bodies they were looking to get back, short of Derek Lively, were playing, and
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn got down. They came back, and it was such a really fun showing of the resiliency, the execution. I know we'll get into the game winner at
Yeah.
Washington, but I think all of those things, and it just felt like the way the week ended, the way the road trip ended, there was a lot of really good juice here as you headed to this final stretch for Brooklyn. And I think that's what you want to see, because regardless of circumstances of all things, you want all these individuals and you want this group to feel good as they head into the off season.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive into specifics. The Wizards, they are they were 10-17 since February started. So I know they had a really tough first couple months. That record looked pretty awful, but really for 2 months now, they've been a decent to competitive NBA ball club. You could find a lot worse records than 10-17. And then Dallas was welcoming back Daniel Gafford. They were big. The Nets don't have Day'Ron Sharp.
Yes.
They didn't have Noah Clowney, and the size disadvantage really did not bother them. I mean, they gave up a lot of points in the paint, but they combated that in other ways, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. Just first, though, a couple of shout outs that we have to get to, or that happened over the last week. Tyson Etienne, who the Nets signed to a two-way deal, scored his first NBA point on his first NBA shot. He made a three at home against the Clippers, and he became the 5,000th player to ever appear in an NBA game. So that's a cool piece of trivia you have to file away for an episode of the Backcourt in 15 years or whatever. And Drew Timme did the same. He not the 5,000th player to appear, but he was probably the 4,999th, and he's had a great 3-game start to his NBA career, and we're going to dive into that. But I just want to ask and talk first about the synergy between the G League's Long Island Nets and the Brooklyn Nets, because that's kind of stood out all season, and we've talked about it. I've written about it for a couple years now. Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharp, Nick Claxton, all of these real deal NBA contributors, Jalen Wilson, have spent a lot of time in Long Island. And this season, Tyrese Martin worked his way from a two-way to an NBA standard contract. Drew Timme was not on any two-way deal earned an NBA contract. Tosan Owoma, Long Island picked him up. He's contributed in some big ways. And Tyson Etienne just making his debut. What is it about either what you know about Long Island specifically or the G League in general that has made it such an effective farm system for Brooklyn? Because it's a really unique, part of the NBA.
A really unique part of the NBA, and I'll go back to, this not to take us too far back, but
Hmm.
I had, this was actually back when the Raptors 905 had won the G League title with Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam. I'm trying to think who else was on that team, but nonetheless, you get the point. Those years, that time, the couple seasons I call the G League finals, and it was when they were trying to get one-to-one with NBA teams. And so, the prior
Yeah.
years in Sioux Falls and obviously the Miami Heat team and the connectivity between that group, and you could tell that organizations were starting to latch on to the idea of this isn't just more of a concept of the G League being a place that you're kind of pulling different players, and it's more of a showcase of players, but not necessarily the systems that are feeding into the pro team, the NBA team. And I think from that, we now continue to see the growth, especially with Long Island, because I know, Lucas, we're so tied to it. We see it. We
Hmm.
understand the coaching.
Yeah.
Systematically, everything is in line. And you have an opportunity to have players get a full understanding, whether it's during training camp, whether it's through the course of the off season, and then during the season, doing the things that they would potentially be doing with the Brooklyn Nets club as well, and vice versa, or the back and forth. And I think too, just the value that has been shown in so many different NBA players, and you can go down the list. I feel like Alex Caruso was a big one of that early on. Many others that it was no longer, it's not a demotion going to the
Hmm.
G League. It's not a circumstance where oh, I've got to go. It's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to improve your value, get some run, whatever the skill set is, to then get set to have these type of opportunities. And so I think more than ever, you see that with the Long Island Nets. Give a ton of credit to the different coaching staffs and staffs that have been through there, and those obviously that have been in the front office of the Long Island Nets, but Mfon Udofia, like what he has done with this group and in the synergy between the coaching staffs. And I say all that to say that so many of these players, you've mentioned them all that have played for the Nets, they talk so much about what that time has meant. And so now you see the jump of these players, and Jordi Fernandez said it in a recent press conference when speaking about, and whether it's some of the time Tariq Whitehead, or now what we've seen, just kind of the flawless transition of
Yeah.
Tyson Etienne, or obviously Drew Timme, that he said we know these guys, they know our system, they know what we're asking of them, we know what to expect of them. And so it's not some big, hey, we got to go back through the whole playbook and realign everything that we're doing. And that's been evident with how they're playing. And so that's a long-winded way of saying I can't say enough good things about what the G League is, specifically with the Long Island Nets, but just overall the league in general, how organizations use it, what it does for these players, and how much it impacts the potential sustainability or longevity, or opportunities throughout the course of their career, because they have that type of translatable experience now.
That was a great pull with the Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Raptors 905 championship squad. And I do feel, that was 2017. It does feel like over the last little bit less than a decade, the NBA has really leaned into the G League as a development ground. Obviously, changed from the D League to the G League in that time. A lot of NBA teams, if not all, have gone 1-to-1, with their own G League team. And Drew Timme said it when he was called up. He not only praised the coaching staff and, how hard that they've pushed him and the grind that the G League is, but he said, I will say a lot of faces are familiar to me coming into this. I've never been to Barclays before, but I've seen a bunch of people around and everything. The offense is similar. So trying to learn everything real quick, that's been a little easier. But most importantly, you see familiar faces around, and that also makes it comforting. So I think especially in a rebuilding sort of era for the Nets where there's a lot of young talent, it's great that they're not just quote unquote plucking guys off the street. There is a synergy, and it's helped guys like Tyrese Martin, Tosan, and now Drew Timme. And just a big shout out to the work that Mufon Udofia has done. We cover Long Island Nets at NetsDaily. I want to shout out my guy, Scott Mitchell, who covers them, is a beat writer covering the team. But, the story of the Brooklyn Nets, and Jordi Fernández has said this over and over, is not complete without talking about the full club, the full organization, and that includes Long Island. And I think it's very, very appropriate to shout them out. And now it's appropriate to dive into the man of the week, maybe an early Brooklyn's finest selection, Drew Timme. Timmy time. Timmy time is March Madness legend. He is the sixth most points in March Madness in the tournament history, and his good fortunes in this month have just continued. What have you seen from Drew Timme, who is averaging 13 points and 6 boards over his first 3 career NBA games?
He does all the little things. Like, to me, it's just the instincts and the feel of how to
Mm-hmm.
play. And
Yeah,
obviously, you see in the production of points, of rebounds, craftiness around the basket. But him picking up some of that loose change, him getting on the floor, diving for
yeah,
loose balls, all of those things matter. And when you go through an individual like that who had the type of success he had through his collegiate career, and then doing what he did to earn this opportunity, like, he just, to me, jumps off the page as a winning player. Like, you can't always
right.
categorize all the things. You understand how he can play, you understand the fit that he brings, his ability to facilitate in that big spot. But he just feels like a winning player, and I think that's why you have seen him have a lot of moments that really energized what the team was doing or came at important times. And I say winning moments, obviously the game-winning play, and that was a beautiful play and pass by Tyrese Martin
Mm-hmm.
off of that circumstance. So give him a ton of credit for creating that. But he feels like a guy you could just count on. You know he's going to be in the right places. You know he's going to be trying to do the right things. He's not always going to be perfect. There's circumstances where whether it's the size, foot quickness, you name it, may come into play, but overall, he just gets it and he understands how to get things done. And that, to me, is a player that, as a coach, you put on the floor and you can trust what you're going to get from him.
It's really interesting that the Nets have had these two-way guys, and I'm thinking of Tosan here,
Yeah.
that came into the NBA as really accomplished basketball. They have accomplished basketball careers. They have a pedigree. Drew Timme and Tosan were focal points of their really good college teams, and so it almost feels different, where, for example, like a guy like Peyton Watson on the Nuggets came off the bench at UCLA for 1 year, and I think his mindset probably is a little different. Occasionally, you know, maybe reluctant to shoot an open three. Obviously, I love Peyton Watson, but that's just a point of reference to where Timmy and Tosan, especially Timmy, these last few games, come in and want the ball, and they're not afraid and they're confident. They've been the best player on the court in huge games in their basketball careers. And I think that really shows with Timmy because when he made his NBA debut versus the Clippers and then that game in Washington, he wants the ball. He wants to show you what he can do. And that's everywhere on the court. Like you can tell he believes he can play at this level. And how about blocking Anthony Davis in isolation last night?
Yes. Yes.
Obviously, the defense is going to be, more of the question mark because we know how offensively skilled he is. But diving on the floor for a loose ball on that end to ignite a fast break, blocking AD. What do you think he has to do to really solidify a solid NBA career for himself? Because we know he's going to play hard. We know he's going to try to play to his strengths. But what do you see as, the key for him going forward?
I think it I think so much comes down to fit and
Mm-hmm.
the role and how he fits within the context of what a team is trying to do. And we talked about the skill set and what he brings to the table, and that's why I don't know what it looks like, but I think part of it is, okay, what is the compilation of the roster, the lineup, the rotation look around him? And where does he fit in that he brings something to the table? Because that's where I think, I know the Nets were down the bigs and Noah Clowney and Day'Ron Sharp against Dallas, Cam Johnson not playing as
Mm-hmm.
well. So that's just positional size across the board. But I think the compliments of you have a player like Nick Claxton, like Day'Ron Sharp, even a Noah Clowney, everyone's different and you've got different skill sets, strengths, weaknesses, and that brings optionality for a coach to a lineup. And I think what Timmy does, again, we've talked about all the little things he does. There's, to me, always a room on a roster for that. And whether it's a guy that ends up playing 25 minutes a night or someone that's playing 12 minutes a night, he feels to me like whatever my opportunity is, I'm going to make the most of it. Whatever minutes I get, that could be variable, changing, or vary based on a nightly basis, based on opponent or matchup or personnel. But he to me is a guy that's okay. What do you need me to do? This is what I can do, and I'm going to figure out a way to get it done.
Yeah, I think for Timmy, something that he's talked about is um, an improving 3-point shot. And I think sometimes that gets overstated in the NBA. Like every big needs to shoot from the outside. I don't know if that's totally true. There's a lot of, really good centers that don't really take outside shots. The Nets kind of have two of them in Nick and Dayron, though they've been expanding their range. But I really do see him with the skill and kind of the passing acumen to play from the top of the key, handoffs, drive the ball a little with that kind of funky, unorthodox game. He had a play against Washington where he caught the ball at the top of the key against JT Thor, who is a big, strong guy, and methodically took the ball to the rim, kind of turned it into a post up and scored with his left hand. And so I think that 3-pointer is going to be big for him. Obviously he's only taken a handful at the NBA level, but the Nets did run an out of timeout play for him to come off a flare screen against Dallas, and he nailed the three. So I think that shows you that they believe in his 3-point shooting ability. We've seen him impact winning. We just talked about the G League. The Long Island Nets did not start the season very strongly. They were, I think, 4-16 if you include the preseason, the tip-off tournament going into the regular season before Timmy shows up. And then they have a winning record. They're above 500 with Timmy, who averaged 24 points a game in his 29 appearances. So he's not just obviously about getting his own, putting up stats. He's about doing it the right way and trying to lead his team to wins. Is there any play or moment or skill that maybe surprised you, stuck out? Timmy's a guy that we've watched a lot because of his career at Gonzaga, maybe more so than other fringe NBA guys. But is there anything that maybe surprised or you liked from his first 3 games?
No, just I think everything I've said and everything
Hmm.
we've said and we've talked about. And I think you're right about the 3-point shot. However, I think his willingness to take it, the
Yeah.
improvement that he showed through the course of even this G League season, that's a factor. And if you're just a player who can somewhat be a threat from that area, especially for how much Brooklyn wants to shoot 3-point shots, but every team's going to have their scouting report. Every team is going to, know their personnel of how they want to guard that with a player, given whatever the efficiency of shooting that is. But no, but I think everything that we've said, and those are all positive things, but I think that's a lot of what we had come to expect from him. I think it was just, can he do it at this level? And I think you saw that in a very small sample size, 2 games, but still 2 games, of which the Nets were able to come away with wins. And he was a impact part of that.
Yeah, and I'm just probably going to go down as a great moment towards the end of this net season. He and Jalen Wilson, middle school teammates, met in the 4th grade from Dallas, get to have great moments in a win over the Dallas Mavericks. That's the sort of stuff you can't script. Jalen had a good week. We're going to get to him. Scored a season high 20 points against Washington. And then he closes out the Dallas game at the free throw line with 2 swishes. That's just a nice, a great moment. And obviously Timmy holding his own against one of the NBA's bigger, more athletic front lines. That was really cool. And it, I think, really exemplified a switch in what we talked about last week, where the Nets have been really struggling to close out clutch games. They
Yes.
have played the most clutch games in the NBA within 5 points in the last 5 minutes since the All-Star break. Prior to this week, they were 3-12 in such games. 2-0 this week. So what changed?
Man, I don't know, Lucas, if I could put my finger on it. I think there's the small things of just getting more comfort in those situations, and that makes a difference. The more you're in those situations, the more that you feel a level of freedom and comfort with one another. I just felt like the quality, some of the big issues, and especially those two bad losses to Toronto and the Clippers. But even the first half or moments when the Nets got down in the games against Washington or Dallas, it was turnovers. And if they're not,
Mm,
if they're not getting some of those quality looks, because there were stretches in Dallas, and even when Dallas had extended their lead to 8 points, I think that it was as large as 10, but 6, 7, 8 points. A lot of it is still came from Brooklyn getting some good looks, just not going through. And I think all of these players are confident enough, especially at the end of games, we see it, that as long as they're getting those looks, there was a great, and I'd say it was sitting, courtside calling the game, watching, seeing their faces. There was trust in each other. Like you could see the build of chemistry, and whether it's Jalen or Tyrese, Drew, Trent, and Keon, like all of those got Nick. Um, I don't wanna leave anyone out because everyone was a part of it. Like, it just felt like they were having fun. They're having fun
yeah.
playing for one another. I'll bring this back to, I think I said it on the broadcast. The shoot-around in Dallas, the morning of that game, it was in Dallas's practice gym,
Uh-huh.
within American Airlines Arena. It was really it felt like just really special energy. Like, it was a good vibe, it was a good environment, and it's not to say that it's not always like that, and sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I feel like when it's a smaller, more intimate gym, you could blast some music, they were going through stuff, but there was just a sharpness, there was an excitement, and there was something about it that felt like they just really had something good going, and I think it translates at the end of games when you just have trust in one another and
Mhm.
when that continues to build. And so, yeah, there's points of execution. It was getting stops. I think Dallas ended up doing a lot of things. There was a lot of moments from Dallas that kind of made you scratch your head of ways in which, to me, it felt like they came out of a timeout with about 3 to go, and they had a nice lob play, I think, between Spencer Dinwiddie and Daniel Gafford.
Yeah.
Um, and from that moment, it felt like, "Oh, okay, now they're gonna lock it down and they're gonna be more sharp." But it felt like they just figured they would walk away with that one. It felt
Yeah.
like there was a sense from them like, "Oh, okay, we've got this back. We're gonna figure it out.
A few
We're the better
moments.
team."
Yeah, a few
Yeah,
moments like that.
and the Nets just kept making plays and making
Yeah.
shots.
And you don't come back from double digits in the fourth quarter too often. It was 94-84. Nets come back, kind of go back and forth. That lob play happens. Then the same thing happens again. I thought Brooklyn's shot quality was just way better down the stretch. And, a lot of the clutch time stuff
Yes.
can be random. It's very small sample size, it's 5 minutes. Sometimes you miss an open shot and the other team makes a tough shot, not really indicative of how well you played, quote unquote.
Right.
But I thought Dallas, what especially, was indicative of the quality of play between the two teams. Brooklyn deserved to win that game, I thought. They did a lot of the little things well. Obviously, shout out D'Angelo Russell for coming back in and commandeering the offense. He finds Nick Claxton on a great dive to the rim on really the kind of the dagger. Um, and all of that reminded me of a quote from Jordi Fernández. I had to look it up. This is preseason we're talking, and he talks about his offensive philosophy and sharing the ball. And I was reminded of this because of the 10 Nets that played against Dallas. 9 hit a three, 8 of them hit multiple threes. The ball was popping. They had 30 plus assists again. And he said in the preseason, I really think that the ball has energy. Everybody touches the ball, everybody's happier. I think that good energy, we need to share that energy. So we've been playing a certain way, and that way is sharing the basketball, being more unpredictable, harder to guard. And it's really cool that 6 months later, he's talking about preseason games there. 6 months later, that feels like the main reason as to
Yes.
why they beat Dallas. D'Angelo Russell, I think at the end of shot clock, kind of had to commandeer some stuff, take over, play high pick and roll. But for the most part, they get the ball to Nick, Claxton, Drew Timme at the top of the key, handoffs, back cuts. Everybody touches the ball. And what did you make of their offensive strategy? Because it felt like they knew they weren't going to out muscle Dallas in the paint. They committed to getting up 40, 53 point shots. They go 20 of 51. They all felt really good. They felt like good looks from where I was sitting. I don't know if you talk to any Dallas people or whatever, what makes the Nets offense harder to guard when they can get those clean looks? Because it felt like that was the reason they beat Dallas.
Yeah, I think that was it, and that's what I was saying of just, like, the quality of looks. I think
Mhm.
there's a belief that those will go through at the end of the game, and I don't think there's anything in particular. I think they just, I think Dallas in many cases was given more room than you would anticipate on three-point shots. I don't
Mhm.
think they had expected the Nets to shoot that well or shoot that well on the clutch. And to me, it was just the quickness of decision making and ball movement by Brooklyn. And so you said it, like that's it. If they continue to move the basketball that way, there's enough threats on the floor when they say stay spaced and balanced that when they're hitting, they're very, very tough to guard because they'll penetrate and kick. So often it looks so good because 'cause they're touching the paint, and whether that's through passing, whether that's through, dribble penetration, whatever it is, they can create those open looks, and they've got guys that can when they get hot, like a Tyrese Martin, some of those big three-point shots that he made, again, Keon Johnson, Jalen, like, there are stretches that when those are going down, you feel it in how they're moving, and I think that obviously anytime you see shots go through, gives you a little bit more juice on the defensive end, and so I think you saw that go hand in hand.
Brooklyn is taking, this is the whole season now, the fifth most threes in the league and the third most corner threes in the league. And, I think a lot of this season they haven't had maybe a like constant aggressive downhill driver that can bully their way to the rim. And against Dallas, big team, not switching a lot of, screens,
Right.
plain drop. That's what the Nets have been best against this season, handoff game, all that stuff you see, initiating from the top of the key. And they were excellent getting into the paint, playing off 2 feet. And so Dallas scores 56 paint points and wins that battle by a lot. But because of Brooklyn's commitment, to spraying the ball around, getting open looks, it never felt, I think, unovercomable. That's certainly not a
Right.
word, but
But no,
it felt like part
that's
of the
what it
plan.
was. Yeah.
In addition to, how did their fight on the defensive glass? They really held their own on the glass against a much larger team. I'm sure you were like feeling like you were getting bumps and bruises sitting courtside.
Yeah, but it was positional, and, like, that's what it
Mhm.
came down to, was positional. Everyone was moving in the and it was not pretty early on,
Right.
um, and especially when they were, going through some of that zone and Dallas was getting in the middle of it. That's what happened in that first meeting, but they were making shots and keeping up with Dallas's shot making, and then they tightened things up coming into that second half. But I think, just in terms of they go through they are good at blocking out. Like, they understood the importance of that, and sometimes when you're playing a team that's that much bigger than you, it's more front of mind. And so you know that this is the one thing that we need to absolutely focus on. And it makes you be a little bit more just intentional on every single time a shot goes up. And I think we saw that with them.
And I would say I like that the ask the announcers question last night was, I believe it was, what do you look at on the stat sheet, or what is the
The
most
most
important
important
stat?
stat, and then I gave 10.
You gave 10, but they were all about the possession game. You
Yeah.
mentioned rebounding and turnovers. You got to get more shots up. I would say a 4-to-1 assist to turnover ratio is pretty good.
Yeah.
32 assists
To
to 8
say the
turnovers
least.
last night.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and if there's, I guess, one stat I would mention from that Dallas game, it's that. There were a lot of strong individual performances this week, especially in the Washington game, where Jalen Wilson scores a season high 20. Tyrese Martin just continues to be rock solid. He had 20 in the Washington game. I know we just talked a lot about Drew Timme, and very deservedly so. So for sort of a modified Brooklyn's finest or whatever, are there any individual performances that you would like to shout out? I know it's tough when everyone is touching the rock.
I just feel like everyone was so I there was just such a complete effort. Like, you can go through the Washington win, even though we got hurt, like what Cam Johnson did,
Right.
to really help them and will them, and especially getting to the line and facilitating and creating so much. I think Keon Johnson has been solid in his confidence, and obviously there's a lot of areas to shore up. D'Angelo Russell, to look at him having 18 and 11 and
Yeah.
some of those games. I mean, he orchestrated things down the street. You asked about what was the difference in closing out that game in Dallas. And to me, a huge part of that, yes, was all the shot making and the little things and the ball movement. So much of that was also the composure that I think in many cases D'Angelo had shown. Nick was great. Like, there's not one player I think we've touched on all of them, but like that to me is the fun part of what this group has done now at this point and what we're going to watch them do. And even, Tyson Etienne getting an opportunity to come in, and he was really like he gave a great burst, and you could just see with his energy on the bench. I could go down the list, but that to me is the special part of what this group is coming together and doing at this point of the season, when it'd be very easy to just pack it in, be counting down the days, counting down the games, and be ready to head off for the off season. And that is the entire opposite of how they've shown up. And so I think you just give them so much credit for that type of professionalism that they've brought each and every night.
Their three lowest minute guys against Dallas were Tyrese Martin, after he had a great start in Washington, Maxwell Lewis, and Dariq Whitehead. They score 11 points, 8 points, and 8 points,
Yeah.
respectively. So
Yeah.
just to illustrate your point about top to bottom production.
And you saying that, like, to me, I specifically, there was a couple Tyrese 3-point shots in that fourth quarter that were
Early
huge, that
fourth,
shifted, that it
huge.
felt like they shifted the complexion of, oh no, this isn't necessarily just going to be a runaway here in the final quarter.
Down 10 points, as I said, beginning of the fourth quarter. Those are the bench
Yeah.
heavy lineups typically
Yep.
in the NBA, start of the second, start of the fourth. And Brooklyn winning those minutes saved them in that game. And that, I think, is a good note to sort of transition to. Well, before trivia, we got a few injury updates. Day'Ron Sharpe with a knee sprain has been out, set to be reevaluated this week. Noah Clowney missed Sunday's game, as did Cam Johnson. So still a lot of moving parts. D'Angelo Russell missed the Washington game, then came back sort of in Cam Johnson's place, veteran leading the offense. Again, shout out to those two guys. Cam Johnson was just the engine of that comeback in Washington, and D'Lo was awesome against Dallas. So veteran presence. So we'll see what's going on with the Nets over this next week, where they are at home. You only have to go on the road one more time. Are you going to Minnesota next weekend?
I am.
How does it feel to be almost done with travel? I know you have other obligations.
Weird. It always feels this time of the season, especially that when we know that there is a actual date that it's going to finish, it always
Yeah.
feels a little weird. I will be going to San Antonio this week. The only game I will not be doing will be the Toronto home game on Sunday. So for the men's Final Four and for some CBS shows, I'll go to the Final Four in San Antonio. But yeah, but it's weird, and it's the Minnesota game is a second of a back to back, so it's just a quick one off.
It is.
If you'd even call it that. So yeah, it feels like it's been a long year, but also it feels like it flew by.
It
And I
does.
think that's a typical to feel at this juncture.
If you guys haven't been to a Nets game yet, here's your chance. They have 6 more games left. 5 of them are at home. Over this next week, they got the Wolves, the Raptors on Sunday, as Sarah mentioned, and the Pelicans. So that's what we'll be talking about a week from now. But now it's time for some trivia. By the way, I found this when I was looking at the Raptors 905 squad that you mentioned. You know who's on that team too? This is not the trivia. This is not the trivia. I'm sorry. Christian Watford, Trenton's older brother.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt that was worth mentioning.
That is. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
And hey, Norm Powell was not on that team, but he was on the next year's team. And another player that the Raptors 905 produced. And so I think the Nets have taken some of that mantle. They're just churning out NBA quality rotation guys in Long Island. That's not what our trivia is about. Our trivia has to be about Drew Timme, or Himmy, as Iron Eagle so delightfully exclaimed in Dallas after he blocked AD. How many Nets in franchise history have recorded a double-double in their debut as in their NBA debut, not in their Nets debut, in their NBA debut, as Drew Timme did against Los Angeles Clippers. I'll give you a hint. It's single digits.
How many Nets?
How many Nets?
Buck Williams.
Oh, wow. You're going to name them. Yeah. Buck Williams is on there. Wow. Great pull.
No, maybe I shouldn't have started naming. I'm gonna give you five others.
That's Drew Timme became the fifth. So
Okay, so
you
four
were
others.
one off. Four others. But the fact that
And
you
now
got
I'm
Buck
trying.
Williams.
Well, I try Buck. I'm trying to think.
There's another famous
Kevin
Nets
Durant.
big. No, NBA debut. NBA debut.
Oh,
not
NBA
Nets
debut. Oh,
There's one more renowned Nets big man from a little past that era that is somewhat of a franchise, that is a franchise legend that did it, that played in the early 90s.
I'm gonna be very upset when I don't get this.
Yeah, is Derek Coleman is another. Yeah,
well, okay,
DC.
okay, DC, okay.
Calvin Nat did it in 1979.
Yes,
And one of
yes.
my vivid memories as a childhood Nets fan was Terrence Williams doing it in 2009 against Minnesota. And I feel like I can picture him wearing those all red New Jersey Nets jerseys around that era. So those are the four.
That's some good company.
It is. You know, we got, hey, no disrespect to Terrence and Calvin Nat, Derek Coleman and Buck Williams, man. Those are some NBA careers to strive for. Also, Drew Timme, great quote. You should go look at his press conferences, at a story I'm writing for NetsDaily right now that'll be out when this pod is released. But a fun week in Nets world. 2-2, two great victories on the road, and we hope that they can continue that momentum when they come home this week. Sarah, any parting words?
No, just let's keep rolling strong here through the final stretch.
The weather is turning. March
The
Madness.
weather is turning. It
Weather's
feels really.
turning.
Who you got? Who you have winning for your final four? Since we're talking
man.
March Madness in college.
I do 4 number 1 seeds is a bit much. I'm very mad at everyone whose bracket is doing well because I just think it's cowardly to pick 4 number 1 seeds, and yet they were rewarded this year. So I can't really hate too much. I got to go with Duke. They're very good. They seem awesome. But really, it wouldn't be surprising if anybody wins. I just think Duke is an extremely rarely polished college team that is awesome on offense and defense. And they got some major talent. But all 4 teams have been great. How about you?
I could agree. I got to see, as I think I talked about last week, Duke and Florida in call in those first 2 round games on radio. I saw Houston earlier. I have not seen Auburn live. Duke just impressed me in such a way. They're so complete. You said it, what they do on both ends of the floor, their length, their size. Cooper Flag is the real deal. John Shire, I know from back. He's from the north side of Chicago, but
Legend.
so I know very well. We go way back, so I obviously want to see great things for him. I really like Florida. But for as much as if you would ask me before the start of the tournament, I would have picked Florida. But after watching them and watching, just kind of how things have played out, more so not just in the scores, but in the performance. But Walter Clayton Jr., he's another. He's another impressive player. So yeah, it'll be fun.
There are some good NCAA teams in this Final Four. Perhaps maybe next time you can corroborate. We can talk about Patrick Beverley's story of calling John Shire White Mike, as he was apparently known in Chicago throughout his high school career.
For another day.
That's a story for another day. But thank you, everyone listening. We hope you enjoy the great weather. It's been happening on the Northeast. The sunny days in New York City, the Final Four, men's and women's. That's going to be just a great next week of basketball, as it always is throughout this time of year. We thank you very much for listening to the Backcourt Podcast, as always presented by Ticketmaster. Thank you to them. Thank you to you for listening. Like, subscribe, rate us, all of that good stuff. And we will see you next week.